All right, why don't we start?
Sorry, hold on one second. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the third Hood River County Transportation District Transit Master Plan Community Advisory Committee meeting. We really appreciate you being here. We know it's a good chunk of time, so we really appreciate it and find your feedback incredibly valuable. Tonight is going to be a really exciting meeting because we're going to be going over service, our alternative service options, as well as a couple other things as well, and reviewing our the community survey feedback. So in order to get started, we could all just do a quick round of introductions. That would be wonderful. I'll go ahead and start. I am Amy Schlappe. I'm the executive director here at Hood River County Transportation District, who does business as Columbia Area Transit. Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Hello, I'm Chris Wachi. I am working with Amy on the public outreach and engagement process.
Sarah?
And Amy, easiest just to, oh, you're going to call on people. Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah Crook. I am the travel trainer for Hood River and Wasco counties. Essentially, I help folks in the Columbia Gorge navigate our public transportation system.
Laura, you can introduce yourself. Or is that Ivy by chance from Laura's login? Okay, maybe she stepped away. Well, fine. Jody.
Yes, I am Jody Bear. I do a lot of things, one of which is I'm a civil engineer and I have designed a lot of transit, mostly light rail, but I've lived in Hood River for almost 30 years now. And so I'm a big supporter of everything other than what's coined as single occupancy vehicles.
You have me booked. All right. So Beth. Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, I'm Beth Hartwell. I probably haven't been here as long as most people. I've been here 16 years, but it's the longest I've been anywhere in my life. I'm glad to have found this, even though it's taken this long. In the last year and a half, I've had some medical issues, which have limited my ability to drive, and Kat has been my best friend. And so when you were looking for users, it seemed, excuse me, it seemed a good place. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Melvin?
I am a person that lives actually in Washington, but I've used the system, the CAT system for years now. Just more recently, I've become a lot more interested in how to get into that system via special needs that have arisen for me. I had a stroke the end of last year. And so I haven't been riding very much, although I'm trying to reconnect with the system because I live in Skamania County. But so yeah, I'm very interested in any developments that are coming on, because right now I'm not driving, as she isn't. I'm not driving either and have visibility issues. So yes. I'm glad to know things are being looked in to help everybody.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad that you are part of this committee, Melvin, and I'd love to connect with you to figure out if there's things that we can do to help make it easier for you using the transit system.
Thank you.
All right, White Buffalo Path Medicine.
Hi, everybody. I am a community member. Well, actually, I did recently also move to Skamania. Can you hear me okay?
There's some background noise, but I can hear you.
Yeah. So I lived in Hood River previously and was using the Mount Adams transit to cross the Hood River Bridge and then the CAT around the city. And so I was invited to participate in this committee, and I just hope I can give some input that will help you guys create a better system. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Laura, are you by chance able to introduce yourself? Okay. Well, it looks like Laura Dunn, who's one of our.
Hi, do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm having some connection problems. I'm Laura Dunn. I'm a CAT board member, and so, gosh, my interest in transit is to improve the quality of life for all of our residents in the gorge, reducing traffic and reducing environmental impact and building community. And I'm, happy to be on this committee and be able to hear from our riders about how we can serve them better.
Thank you, Laura. And if I'm remembering correctly, Ivy is not able to join today.
That's right. She's overseas and in a really different time zone.
All right, completely understandable. Okay, so let's see if I can change slides here. All right, Chris, off to you.
Okay, thank you. I did want to say I did get a message from Taylor. She had an unexpected emergency arise and she had to leave the meeting, so we can update her later. She sent her apologies. For the agenda for this evening, we're going to do a review of the TM process and the outreach and provide an outreach update, specifically talking about the survey results. And so we're going to touch on the survey results at a pretty high level, but you will see how they have influenced the service options that Amy is going to go through. We're going to look at the TMP goals, which you all provided input on, and the CAT board approved. And then talk a little bit about, well, actually spend the majority of the time really honing in on the service options and really hearing from you if we've missed any benefits or considerations within those options, because that input is your input, and what we've outlined is really the basis of what we're going to go back out to the public with as we try to understand which one of the service options best meets their needs. And if we've forgotten any, or if we've missed any service considerations. And then we will end on the next steps. So Amy and I are going to volley back and forth a little bit on this agenda, but right now she's going to give an overview just quickly of the TMP again. It's been a while since we've met.
All right, so the purpose of the Transit Master Plan is we really want to build off of what we learned from our 2017 Transit Master Plan and strengthen key areas of focus and really make sure that we have a clear direction for the next 5 to 10 years. We want to maintain a safe and efficient and community-oriented transit system. It's really important to us that our system really meets the needs of our community members. We want to engage, empower, and strengthen the voice of diverse groups of riders. We don't want to just hear from one demographic. We want to hear from the different demographics that live in our unique and wonderful county. We want to integrate land use, economic development, and local partnerships. So we want to think of it in a holistic view and make sure we're taking several different things into account as we're planning for the future. We develop strategies to address gaps and opportunities through regional coordination. And just, as a general reminder, fixed route transit and really transit in general, besides dial-a-ride, is fairly new to the region. We ourselves just added our fixed routes, started creating our fixed routes in 2017. So we're only about 5 years old with the different fixed routes in the region. So that's pretty new. And it's still, we are finding that there's still a large amount of need to educate our community members on how to use public transit, as it's not something that's really never existed before 2017. Okay, so how we're doing this. We are wanting to put passengers first, reach out and listen to the community, identify partnership opportunities, support regional integration, identify short-term improvements with a vision to the long term, and implementation-focused results. All right, as a reminder, our focus areas that we're going to have comprehensive and targeted, or that we have had comprehensive and targeted and focused outreach, is Hood River East, Hood River West, Cascade Locks, Upper Valley, and Highway 35. And then our regional and general outreaches along the I-84 corridor and other gorge communities such as White Salmon, Wasco County, folks who use, and Skamania County as well. All right, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So just a reminder of where we are in the timeline. The TMP Community Advisory Meeting is number 3 here of the circle in purple. We are about to do the second round of community outreach. After this meeting, we're designing a community survey that will go back out. It might be more, it'll be a shorter survey to get people's input on barriers, considerations of the service routes, preferences, and then some additional questions for certain areas about bus stops. So the next meeting, when we meet later in autumn, and there is, just as an aside, we are probably going to move the autumn meeting a little later, probably to early December. And that is because we require a little more time. And so we'll be following up with you for that final meeting. But that's for you to review the draft TMP for your input. And we'll also have the Technical Advisory Committee reviewing it as well before it goes out for public review. Okay, so let's dive into the next slide. I just want to highlight the public engagement process. We've been really busy since the last time we met. When we started off originally with stakeholder interviews to influence how we are approached. The countywide and regional survey we've just completed. It closed about 3 weeks ago. There's been some presentations to other gorge communities and jurisdictions and planning processes and health councils. And the events and targeted in-person outreach, I'm really happy that Sarah Crook can be here because she has been instrumental in helping us reach throughout the CAT service area folks. So she'll talk about that in just a minute. And then of course, the Community Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. And as an aside, we just met with the Technical Advisory Committee a week ago. So they also provided a lot of input on what you're going to see tonight. So for the targeted in-person outreach, I want to say, in addition to Sarah assisting, we also had a really wonderful assistance with Celeste Perlata, excuse me, and Celeste works with the next door, but she was able to also assist on our Spanish-speaking outreach. So Sarah, I'm going to just turn it over to you if you just want to do a quick overview of how you spent your early summer. That would be great.
So what you see in front of you are photos of some of the major displays I did get up around town. Up in the corner there on the left-hand side was a display in the main branch library in Hood River. I had up for about 3 weeks, just when the survey started. The library has invited us to come back again for when we do the second stage of the survey. So that's on slated. I also put up some displays at Pine Street Bakery and Mercado Guadalajara. In addition to those big displays, we had a sandwich board up for several months at the corner of 4th and Columbia by Double Mountain, and at the bus stop itself, engaging anyone who taking the bus. And then I sprinkled bookmarks, engaging folks in surveys, and put up posters around town, especially some of the larger employers like the Best Western, and talk to their HR department to get some of those bookmarks with the QR code for employees that work, and for them to take the survey. So tabling wise, as Chris mentioned, Celeste and I worked several tablings at the Mercado together, and then she went on her own several times. So we probably did a total of about 5 tablings at Mercado Guadalajara. I also partnered with One Community Health and worked with their Latin outreach department and visited the Fish Food Bank several Wednesdays in a row. Also followed around the mobile medical unit into Cascade Locks and Upper Odell several times. I was also able to hit the end of the year open houses at several schools, the Y East Middle School, the West Side Elementary, and then the Cascade Locks Elementary. And yeah, just general spreading of the word at events I went around during my normal community outreach and promotion of our public transportation system. So that's about it.
Great, thank you. Amy, can we go to the next one? So just quick reminder of what the community survey's purpose was to gain the rider and community experience with transit and understand the real perceived gaps, needs, and future mobility options to explore. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. We've talked about the methods. There was also some intercept surveys of folks riding on CAT that occurred as well. So if you can go to the next slide. I just want to kind of give some demographics of from whom we heard from. So the question was, in which community do you live? So the majority of survey respondents, we had about 60% live within Hood River County. And you can see proportionately the most of it was from Hood River East and Hood River West, followed by Odell and Lower Highway 35. Upper 35, and then Cascade Locks. Next one, please. For the 40% that did respond outside of Hood River County, this is the results. So Portland, White Salmon, Bingen, as well as some folks in Moisier, and then other folks, the Dalles. And some of the other communities noted were Stevenson, Lyle, Underwood, Oregon City, Dufur. So there's a pretty broad geographic scope for those other folks, the folks who identified those 56 other folks. Next one, please. So in terms of the age group of our respondents, we had very good representation between 25 and 64. Some representation of folks over 65. Really pleased for the under 18. And I do want to give an international call out to Ivy because she was pretty instrumental in helping us, as well as Sarah doing the outreach in the schools. So that was helpful. Next. And then in terms of helping us understand the race, ethnicity of folks who responded, the majority being white Caucasian, but we had up to about 21% of folks of Hispanic or Latino background or identification. That is, we were shooting for 30%, but we have 100 out of our 479 respondents for that. And then that's followed, some folks preferred not to say, And then you can see the smaller numbers there. Next one, please. And then in terms of the annual income, it's pretty close. The majority are over 100,000. And then we have some folks who preferred not to say, but it's a fairly close split between income levels of less than 15,000 up to 100,000. So I find this very interesting. For the majority of folks who answered this question, the majority of folks are employed, and that's followed by folks who are retired, and then parent of a K through 12 student. So you can see that the majority of folks interested in taking the survey identified as employed. Next, please. So when we asked about what are your barriers using CAT, the CAT doesn't go where or when I need it to. And then what was interesting was outside of the other, and I'll talk about that just a second, was the lack of bus shelters. So that really called out, and again, you'll see that as we move forward. The other comments, there were quite a few other comments, and we haven't tallied them all up, so I can't give you percentages, but they were things, actually some of the comments really are reflected in these columns to the left, but folks used other. But we did hear that there's a lack of understanding. There's the schedules, hard to read, lack of awareness of CAT services, lack of outreach or service to trailheads, night skiing, nighttime services, as well as car seats on the bus, and a few other items, but not one that really jumped out. There was just a lot of very distinct responses in that. Next one, please. So the question was, what needs to change or improve for CAT to have a greater role, in your community life? Leading the top, expanded bus routes, followed by extended days and hours, followed by frequency of service. So you'll see that again as we move forward in the meeting on the service options. Oh, and I'm sorry, Amy, can you jump back on that one? I did want to say again, more identifiable bus stops along the route. That came up repeatedly, okay? And then when we asked specifically which extended hours would you like to see, weekend service was the highest response, followed by evening services, followed by commute times. Next. And the safety measures that were posed, and I wanted, as an aside, just say that this information will be shared with jurisdictions because it is very telling, is that lighting, sidewalks, and crosswalks near transit stops were very clear. Next. Okay, so before we go into the TMP goals, I just want to pause and ask the committee, are there any other questions? Would you like to see the full summary of the data? We're still packaging it in a way that makes it a little more easily read, but I just want to pause here.
Chris,
Hi, Jody.
this is Jody. Could you clarify that? You said something about lighting crosswalks and sidewalks at transit
I'm not
stops.
gonna have to really talk in this meeting. I'm listening in. So
Getting close. Oops, I
if
think
you,
some. Whoops.
want me to talk? Talk.
Someone may not be on mute right now, but Jody, those were the ones when asked, what were the safety measures? If you said safety was an issue, then we asked them what would be issues that you would, or what are things to address? Those were the things that they highlighted for their ability to use CAT.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, Amy, let's move on to the TMP goals.
All right. So again, as we discussed the last meeting, we wanted to take a look at the Transit Master Plan and goals that were created in 2017. And with your help, we refined them and added a couple things. And these were amended and adopted as well, or approved by the CAP board in June. Okay, so goal 1, a balance. So to support a transportation system in Hood River County that increases the use of transit, especially among choice riders. So those who have a vehicle but choose to use transit. And I do not believe that we amended anything on this goal. I'm going to go ahead and move to goal 2. So efficiency and stability, to operate efficiently and seek stable funding. And this we also did not amend.
Amy, there was a, can we go back to that one? I just want to highlight that the CAC did want this goal to reflect connecting to affordable housing,
Oh, yes, that's right.
connecting
And-
affordable housing to transit.
Yes, and that will be reflected in the land use summary that we had a consultant do for us. And we'll make sure it's included. Okay, for goal 3, access and equity. I did want to point out the last 5, as well as, so the CAC asked us to, in objective number 3, so the whole goal is to maintain and improve accessible and equitable transit system. Objective number 3, ensure transit service is safe and meets the needs of diverse markets, including but not limited to middle and to low income populations. The CAC had asked us to include the middle, so we did that. In addition, asked us to include the develop, park, and ride lots for intercity routes, use technology for increased visibility, access, and awareness of transit information, payment options, bikes on bus capacity, and stop improvements, create first last mile options and services for safe and seamless travel to transit services, and provide transit for non-emergency medical services not available in the Columbia River Gorge. Chris, did I hit everything on that one?
Yep.
Okay. So goal 4, new markets. So that goal is to provide convenient service to developing markets and regional destinations. Here, after information from the last CAC meeting, we added foster new markets to grow future transit usage, explore seasonal services that reduce traffic congestion within the gorge in Hood River County, and develop new recreational destinations in the Columbia River Gorge and the Mount Hood National Forest.
And then on this one, Amy, oh, I'm sorry, you're probably about to say it.
So here we did not address the issue that we had brought up, asking, kind of what is CAT's role regionally, and that's going to be addressed more in the Gorge Transit regional strategy, which is being conducted right now by Mid-Columbia Economic Development District, or MCHED. Is that what you were gonna?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yep.
Yay, awesome. Okay. So goal 5 is brand new based off the feedback from you all. So it's community resilience to support a transportation system in Hood River County that increases the community's ability to withstand, adapt to, mitigate, and prepare for adverse or disruptive conditions. So the objectives are foster land use and transportation systems that offer alternatives for safe and accessible mobility options, connect rural development to transit access, and identify incentives for housing and social services to locate near transit corridors, promote efforts that encourage and support interconnected and safe mobility options, increase energy efficiency and sustainability using low or no emission vehicles, explore creative infrastructure improvements that supports low impact, safe and sustainable development practices and or mobility options, and then ensure transit corridors relate to affordable housing and key social services. Any questions on that? All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to transit supportive transportation options. So in addition to looking at the routes and how they might be adjusted or which additional routes are needed, we also really want to look at different ways that we can help support transit and it helps encourage transit use. So we're going to talk about the first three tonight. So stops and amenities, land use, first and last mile options, some mobility hubs, and then the next three, fare and pricing adaptations, marketing and information, which is going to include technology and how it can be used for awareness, and shift or off hours options will be addressed in the actual plan.
And Amy, I just want to say the land use, we're not really diving into land use in this meeting, but when we send out follow-up information, the land use report will be in there.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Awesome. So stops and amenities, one of a really easy way to help increase transit use is to make sure that there are very easily identifiable stops. And that's something that, as Chris mentioned, was called out again and again in the survey responses. So we're going to have the three different stops that we have are a standard stop, which is a simple pole and sign and a seat, as well as a QRL code for stop times. A sheltered stop, so one of our shelters with lighting, a bench, a real-time tablet, pole, and a garbage can. So those will be at kind of our bigger stops, such as the CAT Transit office. We have one at One Community Health, and we have some in Cascade Locks as well. And then a mobility hub, which will have a minimum of 2 routes and 15 board riders per day, or linkage with 2 or more first last mile options. And there will be a shelter, bench, real-time information, pole, sign, lighting, garbage, bus layover parking or layover area, and bike parking, as well as parking rights. Any questions on that? All right. And so mobility hubs, just kind of more a description of what those would entail. So it would be a spot where multiple different transportation options could exist. So you could have bike share, you could have parking rides, car share, ride hailing, microtransit, and a spot where buses can pull in and pick up riders as well.
And could I chime in just one thing on this? Because mobility hubs, it can mean many things to many people, but these would be tailored with community input further for a particular community. So understanding what the needs or the desires would be of that particular community. And again, we did get some input from the survey on specific types of transportation options people would be willing to use.
Great, thank you for that additional information. Yeah, and the 2 places where we're looking, or some of the options would include like an additional mobility hub would be Cascade Locks and Parkdale. And if that was the route that the community wants us to take, we would be looking, again, as Chris mentioned, specific options that the community would really want. So if, for example, if we were doing Cascade Locks, a bike share system might be more appropriate, or et cetera, depending on what those community members think is the most important. Okay, ready to dive in?
I think, could we pause here? Because it's pretty heavy on presentation to see if the CAC has any questions about anything that's been presented thus far or would like additional information.
Or if people need to stand up and just, move around a little bit, that works too.
It's hot.
I just had one question. I noticed it's called ride hailing, because there are places that you can pick up or get dropped off that aren't necessarily a marked sign. will that continue? Is that part of it?
Yeah, so in theory, yes. We are looking at more where the ride hailing services would bring somebody to these mobility hubs. Does that make sense? So there would be a specific spot at this mobility hub where people could either get in or out of a ride hailing.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's
Okay.
completely different. So thank you.
Yeah.
And another question, the mobility hubs, is that also like what's happening down at the port of Hood River right now, you know, at Lot 1?
Are you referring to the fourth or the Envoy electric car share?
Well, now is it down on the port, we can get onto the bus to Portland, correct?
Yes.
It wasn't that kind of a
Well,
hub?
yes, and that would be considered a hub because it also connects with several other services. So you can get to Mount Adams as well as the link service from there as well.
Yes. So when you mentioned the mobility hubs, it sounded like you were talking about new ones in Parkdale and maybe Cascade Locks, but it could also be an expansion of the mobility hubs we already have in Hood River. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. I'm sorry for
Okay.
that confusion.
That's okay. So like one idea that we could all kind of see would be a park and ride at Lot 1,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
For Portland travelers or something. Okay, great. Thank you.
And that would make sense, as that's also very close to the downtown area. And that is something that we've been working on with the port, of ideas of how we could have a larger presence and a hub, a transit hub down at Lot 1.
Yes. And another possibility would be the south side of Hood River, like in the Rose Hours area where all of our county residents drive into town. Like that could be a park and ride where you would get on you would come to town, but then you would get on the CAT system to move about town.
And to get downtown. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Great. Okay, sorry, any other questions?
Could I just chime in a little bit about ride hailing? It's also transportation network companies that could be considered ride hailing as well. So that would be Uber, Lyft, shared taxis, that kind of thing. I just wanted to add that to your description.
Oh, guys, when Chris said that, I just thought of like the future of, I mean, we're getting very close in the transportation world to the future of, what are they called? The cars, the automated cars. I don't even know. Autonomous cars. I mean, they're doing it in San Francisco. So
Francisco, Phoenix, Detroit. Yeah.
So
Los Angeles.
is that included? Like that is going to be happening soon? Is that being thought about as part of our transportation, the CAT transportation plan?
So I have spoken to an organization, I don't know, probably a year ago about something like that. I think that's probably further off in the distance for us. Just there's a lot of different things that kind of go into that. But I think that's kind of the point, to kind of highlight that these mobility hubs could include these different transportation alternatives that technology is allowing to happen. So I think while we listed, a good amount of different transportation options that would probably be there, I think the intent is that they're flexible enough so that they could include other transportation options that are created because of technology, or that could be a sensible solution to our region and our needs. So I guess short answer, it could include it,
Right.
but we didn't necessarily highlight it here. But I think to your point, I think it's, you know, the world is our oyster, as these mobility hubs would have the flexibility to kind of be that hub for all these new transportation solutions.
Yeah, and I even see like our bus stops all over town, you know, where the cat bus stops on a set schedule, those same shelters and little stops all over town could also be used by the automated vehicle
Mhm.
taxi systems, you know, so anyway, but that, and I think that will be here soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, you know, the more that we can make safe, not safe designated bus, you know, pullouts that other options could use when the bus is not using, I think that makes potentially a lot of sense, as long as there isn't a conflict there. And that
Right.
would, and that would be the only potential issue there.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jody. Any other questions? One other thing I did want to point out, even though we say ride hailing, and when we say ride hailing, most people connect that to Lyft, Uber, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean that it has to be Lyft, Uber,
Right.
whatever. It can be a community-driven ride-hailing organization. It doesn't have to be one of those big names.
That's a great point, Amy. Right.
And that also goes for the bike share, the EV scooter share, et cetera. It doesn't have to be Lime, Spin, et cetera, et cetera. There are other alternatives out there that are more community-based organizations, and we could use local businesses rather than bringing outsiders in. And if that were something that the community wants us to do, then of course we would be working with the city or the county in order to do that. Cool. All right, onward. So before we get into all the different options, I wanted to look over the current Hood River route and kind of go over the benefits of it and the things to consider about it. So as you all may know, the current Hood River route, it is a circulator route, so it does go one way. So it goes from, you know, Walmart to the Aquatic Center to Rosers, and then, you know, downtown and to the port, and then back over to Cat. It is about a 45-minute loop, and it right now it's operating from 8 in the morning to, or 7 in the morning to 8 at night. And some of the great things about this is that everybody's, you know, pretty used to the system. They know it, they know the stops. Some of the stops are still A-frames, so that's something that we're working on to make them permanent stops. And those are some of the good things about it. And it does, you know, for the most part, gets you around town. Some of the things to consider about it from a, it only gets you one way. So if you want to get from the Heights over to Walmart, you have to basically ride the route for at least 30 minutes. And for some people, that's just completely out of the question. You can either drive that amount of time in 5 minutes, or you can almost walk there in the same amount of time. It's also kind of not super efficient for someone who is coming from downtown and wants to go straight up to the Heights. So those are some things to think about. And also just, you know, it's just one way. Any comments or questions? All right. So our first option is to keep the current Hood River City route. So we'll continue to have that circulator route throughout the day. And then we would add a Hood River East option 1 and a Hood River West option 1 during peak times. So that will allow us to go down to, I think it's almost a 15-minute frequency during peak hours. And then still that 45-minute frequency, just the circulator route during midday.
And Amy, for folks who aren't familiar with what the peak hours are for CAT, could you share that?
Yeah, so in the morning it'd be 6:30 to 8:30, and in the afternoon 5 to 7.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and so here is the Hood River East area. So it's basically just a there and back between the port downtown and Heights and Rosars, and then back again. So a really quick shot. And then the west, it'd be over, from Rosars, and then go to the west side of town. And we would add a couple of different stops here. And then there's the Aquatic Center, Safeway, CAT, and then they'd also go down to the port and the Best Western. So again, this option 1 for the east and west of Hood River, those would only be during peak hours, and we would keep the circulator route during the entire day. Does anybody have any so I guess before I'll ask for questions, this would allow us to increase our frequency during peak times. It would allow for folks from the Heights to easily get to, or much quicker, about 15 minutes, get to the west side of town. And then also to the port and Best Western. And it would have connection points at CAT and Rosars to the other services. It is a new service, so there would require lots of marketing. There could be the potential for confusion for riders, the fact that you have a circulator plus peak express services. And this in this area would replace the HR Connect service that we have. And then for the east side, again, it's a new service. And it reduces service to east side or west side directly. And this option would pair with one of, so this pairs with the west side, as we discussed. But it would increase service to the Hood River downtown, as well as make it easier to get to port too, and get from the port up to the Heights. Any questions?
Yeah, using your example of the person who had to ride 30 extra minutes, what would this do for them?
So this would allow someone who, if they were downtown shopping, having a blast, and wanting to go up to the Heights, instead of a 30-minute ride, it'll be about 15. And this would still allow someone who's from the Heights, maybe they're going downtown to work, or they're going to the port, or even if they're going a little bit to the west side, this would still allow them to do that easily.
So these options, are these the ones that are only during peak hours, only for the hour in the morning and the hour in the evening? Or
Yes.
Okay,
This,
so you got to be fast.
I'm sorry.
Oh, just to, if you want to go shop. Right.
Yeah, and I think this is for this option. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay. So here's option 1, and here's the other option 1.
Right.
So this, I think, if you had this option, this would be more. This would help people who are going to work,
right.
Or going to or from work. I think this is
Right,
really
commuters.
the folks that this would help.
Right.
You would still have the circulator if you're going to shop during the day and stuff. But mostly, I
Not
think this
not at a
would,
15-minute frequency, though.
I'm sorry,
Not at a 15-minute frequency.
correct, yeah.
So you would have time to shop.
Yes, you could, but this out and back thing would serve more probably the job use case. But you would still have the opportunity to shop and do your things. It would just be, you'd have to use the longer circulator.
Thank you.
So it is more specifically for commuters and not necessarily for people that have to go the long way around and need time.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So
Any other-
Amy,
I
go ahead, I'll wait.
oh, that's all right. You could go and I'll go after you.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, we have it seems to me, and I don't know because I don't do research on these things, but that we have an unusual like, I don't even know the right words. The way people live and work in Hood River seems different than the larger cities. I recognize that we do have peak hours of traffic on the roads, but they're very short. They're like half an hour long peaks, it seems. But I think there's a lot of people that work out of their home and do different kinds of things. Do you guys have any data on how many commuters we actually have that would benefit from the 6:30 to 8:30 a.m. and then the 4 to 6 or whatever the hours were?
I do not have necessarily the specific data of, how many riders we necessarily, or like how many commuters necessary during those times. Based on the survey feedback that we've received, there are more people who are asking for those peak hours to help with commuting, to make it easier for them to use it. I can also tell you anecdotally, so this is a ridership base that we are growing. I take the bus home every day, and I'm seeing more and more riders who are clearly coming from work who are using it around the 5:30 timeframe. And I can tell you our ridership does increase during those times as well. But I think this is mostly based off the feedback that we've been getting from the survey and just in general, that people would like increased service during those peak times, commuting times, so they could use the bus instead of necessarily taking their own car.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great. I really like the idea of having the two sides of town in quicker 15-minute loops, and then you still have the option of the other.
Mhm.
The big loop if you miss this loop or whatever, or the rest of the day. I like it. And then I guess you flex it if it doesn't work exactly, or you extend it. Yeah.
There's lots of options that we can do.
My this is White Buffalo Calf. I had just a idea, but it just seems that the bus route doesn't really pass by a lot of the residences, especially west. So it seems like for those people, they just, there it goes. Thank you. Like, there was one of your employees, he's a wildlife firefighter, and he drives one of the dial-a-rides. Anyway, he had this idea about having a grid, so like a bus that goes from east to west, and then one that goes from like north to south, to where like you could reach people that are further out if they could get to like somewhere like May Street that goes all the way through, and then they could get off and hop on a bus that goes down. But I don't know, it seems like you have only one cat bus running at all times, or have you ever considered having two running at the same time in order to
create more of like a grid, so that more people, it offered, more coverage.
Yeah, so that's what we would be doing here. We would be having 2 vehicles on at a time for this option. I think grid could potentially be difficult because you'd have to have more vehicles on at a time in order to serve all the different sites, which is kind of how we came up with this solution of kind of 2 sides of a circle, kind of making a whole. It also could be seen as kind of like a triangle. So you have the east, the west, and they all, as well as the circulator, and they all kind of combine everything.
And this option too does serve more west side neighborhoods, the areas that are developed with more connections to the east side and then to the activity center. So just to highlight that.
Yeah.
So I just want to do a time check, Amy. We're on option 1 and we have a half hour
Right.
to
I'll
continue.
go ahead and move it along a little bit.
Thank you.
So for option 2, it's the same kind of idea for east and west, except we would just kind of permanently split out the east and the west side, and there wouldn't necessarily be a circulator. It would just be the east and the west, and they'd be operating the entire day, and that'd be about a 30-minute frequency. So here's the east side. You can see that, and again, it's an out and back. So you would work on getting bus stops on both sides. And then the west side, and again, you go from Rosars and you go again, kind of go on the west side, and then you connect back with a CAT and Safeway and the port as well. So I think that the key thing also to remember about these west side options is some of this will depend on the Rand Road development, and there's also going to be a housing development, affordable housing development that's actually going to be on Rand Road as well. So that's some things to kind of consider as well as we look at these. All right, any questions or thoughts on option 2 for east and west?
Could you explain just why there's a potential for fewer riders in the longer term? Is it because it's such a long route, or that in terms of population and density?
Yeah, I mean, it's less populated on the west side. But I also think that it's kind of hard to really estimate because there's also, I think, the development that could be happening in Hood River County within, closer to the city limits is going to be in those regions. But yes, primarily because if you're comparing this to the Hood River City route as it is now, this is going to be a lot more densely populated.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it just kind of serves a larger geographic area as well. But this would also help because we have a lot of dial-a-ride riders that actually come from this west side. So it would allow us to encourage more people to use fixed route rather than the dial-a-ride services. Any other questions?
Are you guys looking for preferences from us or just options?
Right now, just if there's benefits or considerations that are not listed here, which I think for the preferences, you'll have an opportunity to weigh in on those as well. But I would be interested, Jody, in what your thoughts are. Yeah.
Well, I just think reducing the cycle time to get places and to have it consistent are the 2 most important things. So if it's reducing it to a 30-minute from 45, that's significant. Wow, the 15-minute is really, really fast. And then the other thing is to have it not too confusing.
Mhm.
So like from priorities, and I also think if you went with concept option 2, which serves like an all day long, same routes, you could still fine tune the actual route, right? And when and I think there's connecting links between the two of them. Like there's a west side and east side, but once people figure out how to get around, they'll figure out how to take one to here and then the other, et cetera, as long as they run on a set schedule.
Yeah, and these help with making sure that there's an option if you're trying to get from the Heights up to the west side and or the Heights to downtown. Option 2 allows that to happen both times. And like you said, it's consistent. So this would be the same 7 days a week, no matter what time it is, which could potentially be less confusing than option 1.
Yeah. And I think your commuters, if someone's using this for commuting, if it's faster, and then they'll get on a regular schedule, they'll get their 7:15 bus every morning, and they'll get to work at the same time every morning. And that's reliable for a commuter. So I think that getting there faster every day is really, is going to help get people on the bus, and then they will realize all the benefits of not driving their car.
Mhm.
Yep. So I think you're in the right direction on, I don't think you can go wrong by changing.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to confirm that I understand, because I need repetition. So option 1 is the traditional route plus the 2 quick commuter routes.
Correct.
Option 2 is just having these 2 routes.
Correct.
Okay. I can
So it
see the
wouldn't have that
advantage.
situation.
I can see the advantage to these 2, the option 2. Thank
Are
you.
there any other benefits or considerations that maybe we don't have listed here that we should make sure we include?
The discussion is only about these 2 alternate routes options. Is that what it is?
At the moment, yes, we have the
Then I
other
have
routes.
nothing to say. I got nothing to say.
Okay,
Let's move on, Amy, I think, to talk. Yeah, great, thank you.
great.
I just want to add one more thing, because it could be a lot less than 30 minutes because it's an out and back. And if you're not going, you don't have to go the whole route.
Yes, correct. So when I
But
say
the
30,
Heights and downtown and back, it's not going to take me as long.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, and that's the estimated time of just how long it would take to do the whole loop once.
Exactly.
whole
So it could well
route up
be
and back.
half that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, great. So for the Parkdale and Upper Highway 35 option 1, basically we are proposing to add a bus stop over by Town Hall. And this way can be integrated as part of the Gorge Mountain service. It would increase fixed route service between Parkdale and Hood River. And it would have community mobility hubs and McIsaacs and Mountain Hood Town Hall. And it does not have direct service to Odell, so it's probably the biggest consideration. Any questions on this guy?
Because you would need to do a transfer.
Correct, yes.
Oh, at the town hall mobility hub.
Yeah, or I believe it was, yes, I believe it'd be the Town Hall Mobility Hub. If there's potential for it to happen at McIsaacs as well. The only issue with that being that the buses that we would run to do the Gorge to Mountain service, they can only go on Highway 35 because they're bigger buses. And so going into Parkdale might create some sort of issues just because how large the buses are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so the service in Parkdale right now is deviated. So people
Yes.
call up and say pick up, and they're picked up either at their home or at a location that they do.
Yes, so this would remove the deviation piece.
So people would have to get to the route.
Yeah, so we would have to work with potentially taxi drivers or what have you to get people to those connections so that we could pick them up on the fixed route.
I think it's great as long as you can get people to your bus stop. And because it's the county and all, you know, they're definitely car drivers, so. But I think it would be really helpful.
Okay.
My question is this, when you say taxi, is that part of a system here? I just know my mother-in-law in Reno couldn't get near any kind of fixed route, but they have an actual taxi card where she can get the cab to where she needs to go. Would people be responsible for getting themselves to this route from wherever they live in the rural areas?
Yes, and then it would also give us the opportunity to work with local taxi cabs. We actually have funds that we can help or can be used to help get people to mobility hubs so that they can transfer to our fixed route service.
Okay. Second option.
All right. So the second option would just be adding a optional transit hub. So it would just create more flexibility and access than the current route. And it would focus on having the mobility hub near McIsaacs. And then there'd be a limited midday dollar ride connection between Odell and Parkdale for those unable to get to the mobility hubs.
So this one would have some dial ride, but on a limited midday basis.
Yes. And then this would remove a fixed route service to Parkdale.
So Parkdale would only have midday deviated services unless they go to the mobility hub on either at Town Hall or in Park.
Yeah, and then they would connect them to Odell. Any questions or benefits or considerations that we should add?
We need somebody from Parkdale to tell us.
Mhm.
Because I think you might get a lot of people who would ride their bike and park it at the hub if you had a fixed route. And I think that would be a huge benefit. And there's a lot of people that live in Parkdale
Mhm.
that I think would really, if the times were decent, they would use it.
Yeah.
The fixed route option.
Option
Yeah, so option one.
But we need Parkdale people to chime in.
Yeah, you could present it as like a pilot. If you're not sure about it, maybe just tell the residents that you're piloting it, and then if you get some loyal riders, maybe they can help you tailor it better.
Yeah, and I think the second survey will help with that too. So when we present these options to the community, we'll make sure that we get targeted outreach within Parkdale area as well as Odell to understand their thoughts about these options.
So Amy, I'm sorry, not to rush you, but I want to make sure everyone sees the options. So we need to move on to Odell.
Okay.
You.
All right, so here is Odell. It's basically just creating a more robust fixed route. And we would have, right now, our Upper Valley service is, it's a deviated fixed route, so that would be removed. Or a limited amount of them. And then we'd have the 2 new bus stops. Any question on that? And we would extend the service hours. We would connect to mobility hubs. And it provides more travel options. And then the second option offers a higher level of service between Hood River and Odell. And then the considerations would limit number of door-to-door pickups and reduces direct connection between Odell and Parkdale. And then community needs to get a fixed route for potential first last mile issues.
The mobility thought, does that have to do with people having, say, special needs, or is that not at all what that means?
So the mobility hub is more, it just adds additional transportation options, but it would definitely take into account people who have mobility needs or restrictions. So, you know, they would all be ADA accessible. There would be connections for those with limited mobility. But the term primarily reflects that there is more transportation options in one dedicated space.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, any questions on those last two?
I just
Chris,
wanted to go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask if there's anything else that you wanted to add.
Did a committee member have something that I talked over? Okay, I think one thing to highlight is that in the consideration does reduce that connection between Odell and Parkdale. But again, if you're working with mobility hubs, that there will be more options there. Is that correct, Amy?
Yes.
Great. Can we go upper? Sorry, Cascade Locks. That's where I wanted to go. Thank you.
All right, so Cascade Locks, right now we have a deviated fixed route that goes every time between Hood River and Cascade Locks. So what this would do, this would just be a much smaller route. It still would be deviated, but a much smaller route, just very localized. And then we would add additional stops here. And then the second option for Cascade Locks is just adding a transit hub. So again, maybe bike share, a spot for taxis or ride hailing organizations to drop people off. And so there could be a clean transition. So if people are trying to get to Portland or Hood River, then we would transfer them onto the Columbia Gorge Express. So the benefits is that it just creates a lot more flexibility within Cascade Locks. And then of course, the negative is just there's less localized service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give an idea of what the ridership currently is in Cascade Locks? Is it local or is it regional? Do folks use it to travel within Cascade Locks?
So it's primarily folks that are trying to get to the Columbia Gorge Express to kind of get to Hood River. Is I think the majority. So I think it's really and that's why Cascade Locks is kind of a tough nugget. And so we obviously really want to hear from the community because it's really, the goal is to get folks easily to the Columbia Gorge Express so that there's more options for the days and times when people can go into Hood River.
Mhm.
I think is where you would probably see the most use.
So in option one, the fixed, if you could go back to option one. So having a fixed route in option one that stays within Cascade Locks.
Yeah, and so it's a deviated fixed route. So it would just be kind of constantly going throughout the day. And it's basically going to be shuttling people to the Columbia Gorge Express stops at Columbia Market and Thunder Island.
Has it been explored the idea of connecting like, oh, it does over to Benton to Hood River to connect over to Skamania County, like in North Bonneville? That's probably been explored, right?
Yeah, the problem there is you're talking about 3 different counties. The way that we've been kind of working to connect those is just working with the different providers, so Skamania County, Mount Adams Transit, and then ourselves. However, there's always discussions like we're able to help out Skamania County or Matt's here and there. So for example, we did that with the Dog Mountain Shuttle. We, crossed state lines and took people from the Hood River, Cascade Locks area over to Dog Mountain, and then Stevenson over to the Dog Mountain Trailhead. So it's not something at the moment where we can ourselves can't do all those things, but it's mostly us working with the different providers to serve those needs.
Nice to know it's thought about.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, or did we miss any other benefits or considerations? Okay. I'm gonna lob it back over to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. So our next steps right now are we're designing a community input survey on these design options. And there'll be a little more refinement. We received a lot of input about bikes on buses and understanding where that kind of infrastructure would be most helpful in terms of bicycle parking and what that might be. So I think there'll be some refinement there and some questions, and also particular stops in certain communities, but really getting input on which one of these services would best serve you, which one of these options would. Amy and I and Ty realize the challenge of the maps right now. It's kind of hard to actually understand them and understand what you're looking at. So we're working on layers where you would have the existing route, and then the proposed route or option would be overlaid on that with very specific information about it, how this changes what you currently have or what currently is there. So we'll be developing that with some targeted questions. I would really appreciate it if the committee is willing to help be part of the beta test as we're putting that community survey together, just to make sure. It's always helpful to have people go take the survey and make sure that it's actually working and getting the kind of information that Kat and the board, the advisory committee, the technical advisory committee need to make a recommendation, and then for the board to make a final decision on which direction to go to. So we're looking at that probably within the next month of getting that up and running. And then again, as you did with the last survey, if you could assist us with, sorry, my camera's off, I realize, assist us with outreach and making sure your networks know that this transportation master plan, now's the time for input, because this is the critical part of what shapes the final product.
Chris, I have one suggestion for the maps, is
Yeah.
that you also get, I know it's approximate, but the time, the
Yeah.
loop time, just
Oh, good.
so
Yeah.
that is really helpful information, I think. And then I think the idea of using us as beta testing is excellent.
That'd be really helpful. I'd really appreciate that. So by loop time, you just mean the duration of the entire route.
Yeah, be clear about the language, but yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And the existing route is 45-minute loop, right?
Yeah,
So
yep.
gives us something to compare.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a lot of information to impart. And so making it human speak is important too. So we're going to be doing that. So that would be helpful. If you can look like you don't sound like a human, that would be helpful. Amy, anything else or any other comments from the committee? This was hugely helpful.
It was. I guess
Oh.
just I guess maybe it isn't the question to ask at 6:54, but in general, were they, I mean, I know that we have some work to do on kind of maps to make them easily readable, with just the different options and what it kind of means. But also, like you said, Jody, just making sure it's clear about how long those loops will take, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, was it fair? Did you feel like you had a fairly good understanding of what we were asking or what we were proposing?
Amy, the thing I didn't get from looking quickly the other day was that option 1, see if I get these right. Option 1 is just the peak hours addition to the
Yeah.
existing route.
Yeah.
I didn't get that at all.
Okay.
And that option 2 are 2 new routes. So
Okay. And
that,
we'll make sure to add that there's going to be some text in the actual survey to kind of help guide that. Correct, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you guys have a challenging job.
But good. That's very good feedback. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah. The next meeting, we'll be sending out a poll because we are going to ask to move that into winter time. So a little technically it's not quite winter, but we're saying in December timeframe for both the technical and the community advisory committee. And then the public hearings will happen in the wintertime, December, January, February, and with the idea that the board will have the potential to adopt the plan in spring of 2023. So there's still quite a bit of time that we're going to be refining and working on it, but the committee will have the draft at the next meeting to weigh in on. Did I capture that well, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't know how hot it is up in Hood River, but down here it's still 94. And I'm ready to put my head in a bucket of ice water.
It is 95 degrees here.
Okay, so I'm just a whiner. Any final comments before we bid you a lovely eve?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
again. Thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
All the
You guys are
best. Bye-bye.
Doing great.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.